Greetings from Randolph College. This is a video overview of a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to provide as part of the Action Research module, and it's titled The Research Problem. I know that many of you have set SMART goals and you have conducted research in your classrooms, and so the setting of the problem is going to be very familiar to many of you. I'm going to do a quick overview of some of the steps and some of the key components to make sure that your research problem is set up for others to understand as well as yourself. So you have heard from Dr. Crystal Howell, and I'm Dr. Peggy Schimler. We both teach at Randolph College. And this portion of the research problem will follow Crystal's overview of the purpose of the action research, which you are also most of you are very familiar with. So I am going to share a PowerPoint presentation, and it is very short. Whoops, let's try that again. Where did it go? No, let's. All right, there we go. Okay. I'm going to minimize my face here so that you can see me throughout the video. I'll move it around depending on the words as they are on the page. So hopefully this is not too distracting. Again, just as a quick overview, that you know that action research is your own personal investigation of your classroom in order to solve a problem, to improve instruction, to improve learning, to increase attention, to change the classroom culture, etc. There are many different reasons that you might engage in action research. Very similar to that SMART goal that most of you have set and followed through implementation of a SMART goal to see at the end what was the influence of your intervention on the students in your classroom. And oftentimes you want to think about that as identification of a problem and an intervention phase, and then a post phase. So it could be pre-test, post-test, all different types of ways to collect data and collect information. We'll talk about that later in the module as well. But the most important thing here is the research begins with your identification of a problem or a situation in your classroom that you would like to change. And it might not always be this problem here that you're thinking about. It might be a situation. So we don't think of the problem as a negative thing in the classroom. It might be for you to improve something of your own instructional delivery. And so it's geared toward improvement in your teaching, in the students' learning, and the focus is always on student learning, okay? So we know that an important part of the research process is this component of reflecting on the problem. And this is where the problem comes in. It's one of the first steps. So as a teacher, I'm reflecting on what needs to be changed in the classroom. So when I was teaching in a 5th grade classroom, I noticed that the children were pretty apathetic. And they basically were passive learners in the classroom, so I wanted to begin to change that culture in my 5th grade classroom. So I identified the problem as the students being passive learners and accepting that role, and I wanted to change that to make them active learners. So that was the beginning of the identification of my research problem. And once I identified that problem, then I could move on to developing research questions, and we'll talk about that in a different video. And then we know that once we've identified that problem, we're going to move on to observation, acting on that, and then planning. So I want you to think about, what is your research problem? How are you going to identify that? One of the things you probably want to do, many of you have just started the school year. You want to wait a few weeks, a month, until the students are used to your routines, you have assimilated and accommodated to the situation as well as the students before you begin to want to think about something that you want to research in your classroom, and then you'll be better able to move forward with the identification of a research problem. One of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're identifying a research problem are the key terms that you're thinking about during the identification of the problem phase. So for instance, in my 5th grade classroom, I had been reading research on private speech, so Vygotsky's private speech and scaffolding. And I had read information and his definition of private speech and the role private speech had in active learning. So let's say I chose to increase students' speech and verbalization when they're working to get them more engaged and more active in the learning process. So I would have to define, what do I mean as private speech? And you might want to keep a notebook as you're moving through this process so you can write down notes, because it's really helpful as you're brainstorming ideas and you can kind of go through and review them, maybe in a grade level meeting or a PLC. And then you can throw these terms out to other teachers, other professionals, and make sure that everybody is understanding your definition of whatever concepts you're studying. So here you want to think about your operational definitions and what you're including, what needs to be defined once you've identified that research problem. The other thing that you want to think about here is your rationale for investigation of the problem. And so you would kind of think, why would I argue that this is an important question or important problem to investigate, to research? So again, that's an important piece of the action research process, because you'll be sharing this information, whether it's with parents or with principals, or maybe you're going to present at a conference some of the information that you have found. And so that can be very helpful that you have a clear rationale or clear reasoning for this. And that kind of follows that reflection, that observation in your classroom. So again, now we're back to you thinking about your research problem. And it could be more than one. It could be you're identifying challenges in the classroom or challenges in your teaching, and you want to investigate them at the same time because they come into a package, right? So if I was investigating my 5th grade classroom private speech, then I also added to that the influence that private speech has on collaborative learning and my role as a facilitator in the learning process and scaffolding. So you can kind of see my research ended up being more complex, and I needed to make sure I had all of those operational definitions identified, and I had my different components of the problems identified, and then that leads me into my research question. All right, so I'm going to stop the sharing of the PowerPoint, and if you have any questions, you are welcome to contact me. My name is Peggy Schimler. I teach at Randolph College, so it's pschimler@randolphcollege.edu. And we will provide information at the beginning of the video with our names, because you probably need the spelling of my name, and the easiest way is to email me. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of this module, and good luck with your teaching this year.